Hi, y'all. So I'm from Texas, so I can't help but say that. And anyway, so I was going into the workplace, and it was my first year at the university, and I was a brand new professor. And I walk into the elevator, and a female colleague of mine was standing there, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you've lost so much weight." And I said, "Okay, here we go. Thanks. Yeah, I've lost about 20 pounds. And she goes, No. You have lost so much weight. You were huge before. You were like out to here. I mean, I can't believe how big you were." I was like, all right, I got it. And so she goes, "No, I mean, really, huge." So I walk out of the elevator. I'm like, what was that? And I remember standing in my office thinking, that was weird. What was that? I think that was a compliment. I'm not quite sure. I'm not really sure what that was. And so I started getting curious about women in the workplace. And I started getting curious about this idea of patriarchy. Have any of you ever experienced this? Where you had what you thought was a compliment, or starting off as a compliment, and then it kind of turned into this like weird passive-aggressive thing, and then you kind of walked away thinking, I'm not really sure what that was. That's kind of what happened to me. And it got me very curious and interested on how women actually can sabotage each other in the workplace, especially under a system, a competitive white male-dominated system that we didn't create. So if we're to think about patriarchy as an umbrella, every single thing that women do, we are told how to act, how to be, who we should be, what it should look like. Everything goes judged and monitored and checked. And it's even more insidious when we as women do it to ourselves, when we start to judge each other. So my body became this focal point in the elevator that day. And I didn't invite that. I didn't say, hey, look at me. It just became this thing, this automatic thing. And I think it startled her. And the thing is that we were in a pretty toxic work environment. We were in a very competitive work environment where we weren't sure how the promotions were going to pan out. So we were judging each other and checking each other. And we do it all the time, right? And sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing it. And we're not even really sure the background of why we're doing it. So on a daily basis, women are subjected to sexual assault, lower pay, rape, sexist language, harassment, policing our tone, our dress, our language. Everything is up for debate. Everything is up for commentary. We wake up in the morning, and every single thing we see, somebody's got an opinion about who we should be. So when we do it to each other, it's even more insidious. So did you know that there's also this thing called slut-shaming? How many of you have heard of that? Boo, thank you. Personalities. That's another one, and I'll talk to you about that in a second. Motherhood. This is a big one. When I first became a mother, I remember judging all the women that were mothers before, how they talked about their kids all the time, and I was like, oh. Then I had one. And that precious thing is sitting up here in the audience, and she's a little budding feminist. And yeah, she is. And she's only 6, too. So we are constantly judging each other, even on the decision to be mothers or not. What is that about? And body image, that's a big one. So when I started to do my research, and I started really getting into this idea of how do women sabotage each other, and it looks like a number of different ways. It can be backbiting, it can be gossiping, ill advice. Catalyst did this great, interesting study where they looked at how women and men were being evaluated. And they found that men were being evaluated very objectively. They were looking at their productivity, their outcomes, their deliverables. Women were being evaluated subjectively. They were looking at their personalities. She was harsh, she was abrasive, she was really hard to work with. What is that? If we're going to be evaluated on our personalities and not our productivity, that is ripe for sabotage. The other thing that we do is we sabotage each other along the lines of systemic oppression. Race, class, gender expression, language, ability, documentation status. These things are other ways that we're using other systemic forms of oppression to oppress each other and to sabotage each other. And we may not realize it because it might be implicit biases that we don't even know we have. So I want to talk about this slide for a second because I got a real problem with this slide for a number of reasons. but I use it because I want to talk about it. One of the ways that systemic oppression happens is through the wage gap. And you'll see this very traditional-looking 1950s man, white man. And he's just, ladies, like this. And then the ladies are yes. So first of all, I don't know any of us. I mean, this took a lot of work just to get this going up here. I don't look like that. And most of the women I work with don't look like that. We're not dressing like that. And the other thing that you don't see is other women of ethnicities and races being portrayed here. So that's something I really want to touch on. In 2015, the American Association of University Women found that compared to the white man's dollar, Asian American women made 85 cents to that dollar. White women made 75 cents to the dollar. African Americans, 63 cents. Hawaiian Pacific Islanders, 60 cents. Indigenous women, 58 cents. Latinas, 54 cents to the dollar. That is almost half. How many of you knew that? Not a lot, right? I didn't know that. And that really enraged me because I started to think, well, no wonder sabotage is happening. There's things that we don't even know. There's things underneath that we're not even aware of. So, and the wage gap gets even wider from ages 35 to 64. So these systems are set up to discriminate already, and there's times that we don't even know that it's happening. So this competitive system, it breeds isolation, distrust, and it perpetuates this idea of internalized sexism. Internalized sexism is basically believing those things, those commentaries that we're told every single day as women, that maybe we're not worth it, maybe there's this whole thing called #worthless, that perhaps we don't belong where we are. And this manifests itself in negative self-talk, shame, fear of not belonging, lack of self-confidence. And I know that I felt these things as a brand new professor. I thought, what am I doing here? I'm an imposter. I'm not smart enough to be here. I remember thinking that. And so I started to think, well, if I believe that, and that's internalized in me, then it's going to regurgitate itself back out and land on other women in the form of sabotage. Because if I don't believe I belong here, then neither do you. So that's really problematic. So I love this slide. So if we look at the patriarchal systems, and if we're too busy fighting each other and not really naming it for what it is, then we're too busy talking to each other and not looking at what the real problem is, which is the patriarchal systems that have set these things up, set up the workplace and just about everything else. So if we're fighting each other, we have to start to name that and look up and say, wait a minute, we're not the problem. This is the problem. The patriarchal systems that we are somehow trying to dismantle and to transform it into something better, something that we can all benefit from. So this all sounds kind of bad, right? It's going to get better. Don't worry. It's not all doom and gloom. So Catalyst, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, and Time have all been very interested in how women can better support each other. And they've also been studying to see if women are actually supporting each other more. And what they found was they are paying it forward more than men. That's fantastic. They're forming affinity groups. They're offering career advice. They're serving as role models. They're doing all of these different things, and that's great, and we should continue to do those things. But I want to offer a few more things that we can do. So this is your call to action. Y'all ready? Okay. There's 3 things I'm going to tell you to do. I'm such a professor right now. There's 3 things I want you to remember, and I'm going to have you repeat it at the end of the lecture. So, right? It's not even a lecture. It's a TED Talk. Okay, number 1, deconstruct your ticker tape. So if you're in my classes, this is one of the assignments I have you do. Basically, if you think about the news, you have this big picture, which is the news, and then you have these running commentaries that go below. And it goes really fast, and it's updates, right? It's really hard to pay attention to the running commentary and the big picture. So this is like your mind. There's this running ticker tape in your head of judgments, assumptions, ideas, and biases. And if we don't start to take it down and really look at it and deconstruct it and see it for what it is, like what is the story behind that assumption that I made about myself not belonging? What is the assumptions and judgments I'm having about other people that perhaps I'm not even aware of? So to take that ticker tape down and deconstruct it and look at it and reconstruct it into something that says, you know what, we all have the right and we deserve to be here. I deserve to be up on this TED Talk stage, and so do every single one of you. Right? Because it took a lot to get up here. So understanding that we have the right to belong, and that every single person in the room with you also has the right to belong. So that's deconstructing your ticker tape. Now, how many of you have heard of intersectionality? All right, good. You can call out. Go ahead. There you go. There you go. So Kimberly Crenshaw first came up with this idea of intersectionality, where she talks about the intersecting social identities and how we each have very different experiences based on all these different identities that we make up. So I'll give myself as an example. So I identify as white, and I have a lot of privilege in that. So with your intersecting social identities, you have a lot of privilege and you have some discrimination. And this is based on societal norms. This is based on all kinds of stuff that I won't get into today, but you'll feel me in a second. So I have privilege in being white. I have a lot of privilege in being white. I also have some discrimination being a woman. I have privilege being a professor, but I might have some discrimination based on my sexual identity. I have privilege being able-bodied, but now, according to the wage gap, since it gets wider from 35 to 64, I'm 42. So that wage gap is just getting wider and wider for me. Now, let's look at my colleagues. I have my Latina colleague who has probably facing a lot of discrimination, especially now, around being Latina, but she has some privilege being straight. She has some discrimination being a woman and a wheelchair user. And understanding that the wage gap is 54 cents to that dollar, even being a biologist, there's probably some discrimination there as well. So that's really important for us to understand that, as not only women, but men as well, to understand that there are many different experiences coming to the table. There are many different intersecting social identities that make up our privilege and our discrimination. And some of it is much more severe and much more violent than we even know. Okay, so intersectionality, so check your privilege. That's number 2. So number 1 is deconstruct your ticker tape. Number 2, check your privilege. Now, how many of you have heard the 4 waves of feminism? There's 4 waves of feminism. Right now, we are currently in the 4th wave of feminism, and it's really looking at online activism. And it's also looking at intersectionality, so that this is becoming a much more widely used term. I remember hearing about Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality a long time ago, but I remember talking to people about it, and they're like, no, we don't really know about it yet, but it's becoming more and more popular, and that's awesome because it's really important. But one of the things I want you to do is to know your cultural feminist history. How many of you have heard of black feminism? And call out if you have. Do a little woo for me. Womanism, coined by Alice Walker. The Chicana movement. The Mujerista movement. LGBTQI and trans movement. There's also many global movements. I was able to go to Jordan a couple years ago and actually hang out with some women that were looking at the women's revolution in Jordan. There's many different movements, and I want to show you a couple of these books here. These books are all of women of color, and they are the most powerful books because if you look at Bell Hooks, Feminism is for Everybody, that is such a great book to give you this idea of the history and the intersecting social identities that come up in feminism. The thing is with these movements is that before I just thought we were trying to get equality under patriarchy. That's actually not the case with these books and with these movements. They're looking at liberation, justice, and transformation of the patriarchal system so that we can create a system, or not even a system, we can create something that we want, something that we all benefit from, women and men. Everybody benefits from these systems. So, what's the first thing you're going to do? Deconstruct your ticker tape. The second thing, check your privilege. Third thing, know your feminist cultural history. Because if we can do this, we can start to dismantle the patriarchal systems that bind us. And you know what? We can do it. Thank you.